Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're looking at something I think a lot of us have been thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
With everything going on with AI lately.
Yeah.
Where is the line between what's real and what's fake?
Definitely.
What's authentic, what's simulated?
Yeah. And it's amazing how relevant Jean Baudrillard's work is to all this.
Right. And this is a philosopher writing back in like the 70s and 80s. And it feels like he was almost predicting this world we live in now.
Yeah, he was talking about Simulacra, these copies without an original. And back then, this was way before,
Deepfakes, AI art, all that stuff.
Exactly, all of it.
It was like a theoretical concept.
It was just an idea, and now we're like living it.
Right. And he argued that as these simulacra proliferate, we kind of lose touch with what's real.
Yeah, we lose that genuine sense of reality.
And he used Disneyland as an example.
Oh, yeah, great example.
Like it's presented as this fantasy world, right? Which then makes everything else outside of Disneyland
seem more real.
Seem more real.
Yeah, well, by comparison, right?
But his point was that America itself was already becoming this kind of hyperreality.
Hyperreal, more real than real.
Yeah.
He was saying that back then.
Even back then.
And now just think about it with
Metaverse, VR.
Virtual reality, the metaverse, it's like...
It's taking it to a whole other level.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're taking it to a whole other level.
And this is where it all ties back into AI and these large language models.
Yes, exactly.
LLMs, as the cool kids call them.
Yeah, the LLMs.
So can you help me connect the dots here a little bit?
Sure.
Because we're talking about philosophy and, this hyperreality.
Yeah.
But how does that connect to these AI systems that are, spitting out content?
Well, think about it this way. These LLMs, they can generate text and images that are practically indistinguishable from human-created content.
So, how do we even know what's real anymore?
Exactly. That's the question.
Okay, give me an example. I need something concrete here.
Okay, so think about the Lascaux cave paintings, those incredible prehistoric paintings.
Yeah.
Well, the original caves, they're closed off to the public right to protect them.
To preserve them, right.
Exactly. So most people experience them through this meticulously crafted replica.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you're experiencing this incredibly detailed copy instead of the original.
So are you saying that if we're consuming all this AI-generated content, we're essentially just experiencing a copy of reality?
Yeah, that's the question that Baudrillard was grappling with.
Instead of reality itself?
Yeah, what is real anymore when you're constantly bombarded with these simulations?
Wow.
And he believed that in a world that's saturated with these simulations, the very concept of authenticity becomes really slippery.
Like we're living in a hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
And we can't tell which reflection is the real one.
Exactly. It's hard to find that ground truth anymore.
Right. And so this has implications for how we see the world.
Of course.
But also how we understand ourselves.
Absolutely. It affects our perception of ourselves, our place in the world, the whole thing.
So if we're being surrounded by these AI-generated simulations, where does that leave our sense of control?
That's a great question. And, Baudrillard had some pretty intense ideas about control and simulation.
Oh, yeah. Fill me in.
He believed that simulation could actually be used as a really powerful tool of control.
Okay.
And he used the example of nuclear deterrence to illustrate this.
Bloody war.
The threat of nuclear war becomes so great.
So terrifying.
Exactly, that it actually prevents the actual event from happening.
So the simulation itself, the threat, is actually controlling reality.
Exactly. The simulation shapes reality.
Wow.
And he argued that this same logic extends beyond just nuclear weapons.
Okay, so where else do we see this?
Well, think about the 24/7 news cycle, how it often creates this sense of anxiety and urgency.
Yeah, for sure.
Even when the events themselves might not directly impact our lives.
Like we're constantly being bombarded with information that's designed to provoke a reaction.
Whether it's fear or outrage, excitement, all of those things.
And in that environment, Baudrillard argued that power becomes increasingly diffuse and difficult to locate.
It's not just about controlling our actions anymore.
It's like controlling our minds.
It's about controlling our perceptions, our emotions, our understanding of the world.
It's like mind control.
In a way, yeah, it's a very subtle form of control.
So how does all of this tie back to AI and these LLMs?
Well, if AI can generate these increasingly convincing simulations of reality, right from news articles to social media posts to entire virtual worlds,
it's like the ultimate tool for this kind of control.
Right. The question of what's real and what's simulated becomes even more urgent.
And the potential for manipulation just skyrockets.
Absolutely, whether it's intentional or not.
Okay, so we're being surrounded by these AI-generated simulations.
Yeah.
Power is becoming more and more diffuse.
It's harder to pinpoint.
So where does that leave our ability to connect with each other in a meaningful way?
That's a great question, and that's something we're going to explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
We'll look at how Baudrillard saw this relationship between simulation and this idea of the implosion of meaning.
We'll see how it might play out in a world that's increasingly shaped by AI.
I am very ready for part 2.
Let's do it. Welcome back. So before we jump into meaning, I think it's important to understand how deeply ingrained this idea of simulation already is.
Okay.
In our world. Like, it's not just about deep fakes or virtual influencers.
Right, so it goes deeper.
It goes much deeper. Remember how we were talking about nuclear deterrence?
Yeah.
That's a form of simulation that has shaped global politics for decades.
Right, it's crazy to think about.
It is, but Baudrillard saw similar dynamics at play even in everyday life, too. Like, he pointed to things like the media's obsession with polls and statistics.
Oh, yeah, always talking about the polls.
Right, and how those numbers are presented as this, like, representation of public opinion,
Yeah.
even though they might not actually reflect the complexity
Of how people really feel.
Exactly, the complexity of people's actual views.
Right.
So it creates this kind of artificial consensus, right?
Yeah, it makes it seem like everyone agrees.
Right, like we all agree on certain issues, and then that can be used to shape public discourse policy decisions.
That makes me think about how social media algorithms work.
Oh, yeah, good point.
They feed us information that reinforces our existing beliefs
Right.
and creates these echo chambers where it feels like everyone agrees with us.
It's like we're all living in our own little bubbles.
Yeah.
And it's hard to break out of that.
Baudrillard was writing about this before social media.
Way before.
But it's like he was so prescient
He was ahead of his time.
About how information would be used to shape our perceptions.
To control the narrative.
So it's not just about the technology itself.
No.
It's about how it's being used.
Exactly. And he also talked about how political discourse often becomes this kind of performance.
Oh, yeah. It's all about the sound bites.
It is.
The viral moments.
Yeah, like those moments that get shared endlessly online, even if they're totally out of context.
Like it's more about the spectacle.
It's about creating a spectacle.
Than actually addressing the issues.
Exactly. It's about distracting and entertaining.
So it sounds like what he's saying is that we're losing our ability to tell the difference.
Between substance and spectacle.
Right, between what's real, what's simulated.
Exactly, and that makes us more vulnerable to manipulation.
Because we don't know what to believe anymore.
Right, it's hard to find that solid ground.
So it's not just about the simulations themselves.
No, it's not.
It's about how they make us question everything.
It erodes our trust.
Yeah, and if we can't even agree on a shared reality.
How can we connect?
How can we build real relationships?
Yeah, it's tough, right?
Okay, so now I'm starting to see how this connects to the implosion of meaning.
Right.
That Baudrillard was talking about.
It's all connected. He argued that as the real is increasingly replaced by the simulated meaning itself starts to break down.
Like everything just becomes surface level.
Right, we live in this world of information overload, but it's all kind of empty.
It's like junk food for the brain.
Yeah, exactly. It fills you up, but it doesn't give you any nourishment.
And he used the reality TV show, An American Family, as an example of this, right?
Yes, that's a great example. It was marketed as this raw, unfiltered glimpse into real life.
Right.
But by framing it as such, it actually created this highly artificial and staged version of reality.
Right.
It just further blurred the lines.
Between what's real and what's not.
Between genuine experience and these carefully constructed narratives.
It's like we're surrounded by these stories.
That
are designed to keep us entertained, keep us scrolling and clicking.
But they don't offer any real insights.
Yeah, it's just empty calories.
And that's where the connection to AI becomes even more unsettling, right?
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
AI can generate these narratives at an unprecedented scale.
Oh, so we're not just talking about social media anymore.
No, we're talking about AI creating entire worlds, entire stories.
That are designed to capture our attention.
Keep us engaged, even if they're ultimately meaningless.
It's like a kind of spiritual starvation.
Wow, yeah, that's a powerful way to put it.
Like we're consuming all this information, all these experiences, but we're not actually getting any real nourishment.
We're not getting anything back.
And that raises some big questions about what it means to be human.
In the age of AI.
Right. Like if AI can create these simulations of reality.
What happens to our own sense of self?
Our own ability to find meaning.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
All right, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, we've been talking about, how simulations are blurring the lines between the real and the fake, And, we've talked about how that erodes our sense of control, even our ability to find meaning.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot. And in this last part, we want to kind of shift gears a bit and explore some of Baudrillard's more radical ideas.
He gets pretty out there.
Yeah, he didn't just write about simulation in general. He also talked about specific technologies that he saw as pushing us further down this path.
Yeah, like really accelerating this trend.
And he specifically called out human cloning and genetic engineering.
Big topics.
Yeah. So let's start with cloning because it feels like the ultimate copy.
Right? The perfect replica.
Yeah, you're literally creating a genetically identical replica of another being.
And that's where things get really weird for Baudrillard.
Okay, so what did he have to say about it?
He believed that cloning represented a kind of death of the original.
Okay, wait, break that down for me.
So if we can create perfect copies of ourselves, does the original even matter anymore?
Right, like what makes the original special?
Exactly, and what happens to our sense of individuality?
Our uniqueness.
Yeah, in a world where we can be endlessly replicated.
It's like that whole idea that if everyone's special,
then no one is.
Right. But with cloning, it's not just about everyone being special, it's about everyone being literally the same.
Exactly the same. And Baudrillard saw this as part of this larger trend.
Towards a world where difference just disappears.
Yeah, a world where individuality is erased.
And he was really concerned that in a world that's dominated by simulation and replication,
we risk losing touch with those things that make us unique.
Our experiences, our perspectives.
The things that make us who we are.
It's interesting because we see something similar happening with AI.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like these algorithms are trained on these massive data sets.
Huge amounts of data.
And also they reflect these dominant cultural norms and biases.
Right. So in a way, they're also replicating a very specific vision of humanity.
That might not represent everyone.
Exactly. It's like a narrow view of what it means to be human.
And Baudrillard wasn't specifically writing about AI.
No, he was writing about cloning and genetic engineering.
It's like his concerns resonate so deeply with what we're facing now.
They're incredibly relevant, yeah.
So what do we do?
That's the big question.
If we're increasingly surrounded by these copies,
these simulations,
is there any way to resist this?
To hold on to our individuality?
And create a future where technology actually enhances our humanity.
Instead of erasing it.
Yeah, like, can we use these tools without letting them define us?
Baudrillard didn't believe in easy answers or grand narratives of like progress or decline.
Okay.
He saw the world as this complex, messy, constantly evolving thing.
So no easy solutions.
Not really, but he did offer some clues about how we might navigate this increasingly simulated landscape.
Right, so spill the beans. What's the secret?
Well, he believed that one key lies in embracing the ambiguity.
The uncertainty.
The playfulness of simulation itself.
So not rejecting technology outright.
No, it's about engaging with it critically and creatively.
So it's like learning to dance with the chaos.
Yeah, instead of trying to control it or escape from it.
We have to find a way to move with it.
To flow with it. And that means being aware of the ways in which we're being simulated.
Like the ways in which technology shapes our perceptions and our desires.
Right, but also recognizing our own agency.
Our own power.
Yeah, our ability to make choices within this system.
So it's not about becoming Luddites and rejecting all technology.
Not at all.
It's about becoming more conscious.
More intentional about how we use it.
And another key point that Baudrillard makes is about recognizing the limitations of technology.
The things that it can never fully capture or replicate.
Even as AI gets more and more sophisticated.
It's still just a tool.
We get to decide how we use it.
What role we want it to play in our lives.
And I think that's such an important point.
Especially when it comes to AI.
Yeah, all these LLMs that are writing, human-like text.
It's easy to get caught up in the hype.
And think that AI is going to solve all our problems.
Or create this utopian future.
But we have to be realistic about what it can and cannot do.
Right. It can process information. It can learn patterns. It can even mimic human creativity to a certain extent.
But it can't replicate human experience.
The richness of our emotions, the depth of our relationships.
It can't tell us what it means to be human.
What kind of future we want to create.
Those are questions that we have to figure out ourselves.
Individually and collectively.
And that is where the real work begins.
It's not about the technology. It's about us.
Yeah, it's about engaging in these conversations, challenging assumptions, exploring different perspectives, and ultimately shaping the future that we want to see.
It's about taking control of our own narrative.
And that is a perfect place to end our deep dive today.
I agree.
It's been a whirlwind tour through Baudrillard's ideas. But I hope it's left you with more questions than answers.
That's the goal.
And with a sense of curiosity.
And maybe a little bit of healthy discomfort.
Because that's what great thinkers like Baudrillard do. They challenge us to think differently, to see the world in a new light, and to engage more thoughtfully with the forces that are shaping our lives.
They push us out of our comfort zones.
So keep exploring these ideas, have your own conversations, and keep diving deep into the questions that matter most.
Keep questioning, keep learning.
Until next time, keep the conversation going.